Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back. If you're returning, I'm talking through my intro because this video jumps right into it. I had to delete some that didn't come out okay. So this is about bead consistency, application, and little tricks that I've learned along the way. So let's get right into it. I hope you guys can hear me with the AC on, but I can't shut it off because it'll get too hot in here. Okay. So I do have these on like I showed you earlier, so I will be showing how to apply on this hard shape. This is really hard, a hard shape to do. So right now, we're just doing consistency. So I don't want any acrylic on my sides, whether it's stiletto, square, coffin, C-curve. So we're gonna talk about that, and we're also gonna talk about how to pick up a bead and what kind of consistency you're looking for. So since I couldn't show it very well, I'm hoping that if I zoom in on this, you guys will be able to see how that brush just drained right here. So you guys be looking at watch my brush, okay? See how you can see it draining? And when I pick up this bead, she's dry. She's dry around the edges. Do you see that? See how she's polymerizing though? So once I get there, this is an absolutely stunning, perfect bead, okay? So, like I mentioned, I don't know if I have to cut that out of this video or not, but my brush is a little bit damp, and I'm gonna start pushing her away from the sides. I want to work with this bead in one piece. So right now I'm using this part of my brush to push and pat her where I want her to go. So she's dry while I'm explaining this to you because I just want you guys to get the concept, and then I will do it with the right consistency so you can see it. But I don't want to go, you know, you have to work with acrylic in a certain time frame. I want to be able to explain to you what I'm doing, so that's why I'm slowing this down. So do you see how you can still see my tip? That's a little too much. Okay, let's do another one. I'm gonna pick up a big ass bead. See how she's dry around the edges? Gorgeous. This one's actually a little too wet, but that's okay. I want her all in one piece right here, and I am not going to do this with her. No, it's not gonna work. She needs to be all in one piece. I'm using this part of my brush to use pressure to move her down. Not using the tip of my brush right now. I'm using this part of my bead, the base of my brush, and I'm patting her in place, keeping her off of the sides. And when I do start to drag down, I'm not keeping my brush like this, I'm keeping it like this to pull away from the sides. If I pull her too far away from the sides, that's okay. I just tap some of that color there. Again, she's getting too dry because I'm explaining. So let's do one. I'm gonna go this bead. I should go and see if you guys see what I mean. I want you guys to practice if your beads are like this, okay? If you're doing this with your acrylic, you're putting a bead down, and she looks pretty good. She's not really going anywhere. That's okay. A little bit wet, but that's okay. And you're doing this with her. You're moving her with the tip of your brush. So now you have different levels. That's because number one, your bead is too wet. Number two, you're not moving her all in one piece. And number three, you're using the tip of your brush and you're painting this. See, I can still move this. She's still wet. And yeah, I get the job done. I get this nail covered with acrylic, and she's thin, and I even kept her off the sidewalls, and she's a nice shape. But now if I go in with another wet bead up here, now it's just too thin. Now I can move her down, and I can do this. But again, now I have these different levels where I need to fill in space. And that's just hard to do because I have to fill in right here, but not here. Not here, but here. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have to come in with another wet bead and kind of if I'm still doing this, then you're never going to have that level. It's never going to be level because you're moving them in different, it's too wet. It's just too wet. And I can get there. I can wait till she firms up just a little bit, and I can move her around and maybe do this a few more times once she hardens up and kind of level her out, but not really. I still have these strange missing spots, thick spots like that. So I guess that's kind of what not to do. Now let's show that again. We're saturating our brush, taking about half of it off. We're going in, we're getting a bead. She looks pretty nice. And we're putting her right here, let's say. We're gonna start up here. We let her go and she looks pretty good. She looks pretty good. But now we're gonna ruin it, essentially, and start doing this. That is not what you wanna do. Because you see that what that's left you is missing spots again. The only place that your acrylic actually looks okay is literally this little circle right here. There's a bald spot right there, if you see it. It's just never going to work out like that. What you want is a bead that you think is too dry. You see the powder coming off of my brush onto my hand? It needs to be drier than you think it should be. And if you're going to start up here, that's cool. And look, we've got that same thing here, but what we're going to do instead is this. We're going to start patting. Pat, 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 pat. When you're patting, you're not just forming the bead, you're keeping it in one piece and guiding it down the nail using this part of your brush. Of course, you use this too, but mostly your pressure and your patting, and you can smooth it out, but your pressure and your patting, you're just guiding this clay-like consistency down the nail. And you're keeping your brush angled like this to do it so she stays off the side walls. So you do not need to have one bead that goes all the way down the nail, but you do want to keep your bead in one piece. So even if I'm doing this, even if I'm only getting a bead that is big enough to cover, see how she looks dry? She's not. There's way more monomer in your brush than you think. And that bead is going to polymerize and suck it up. This is perfect. So let's just say I'm only going to do this area of the nail. I'm still going to start with this part of my brush and move her away from the sides, move her away from the sides like this or at an angle. And while I'm doing that, I'm feeling how firm she is and I'm adding monomer to her. And do you see how I'm working her in one piece? I haven't painted her. She's not separating. She's not thinner or thicker in any area. When I get to where I feel like she is like clay-like, then I can start dragging, because all I'm doing at this point is smoothing her out. I'm not removing her. I'm not making her thinner. She's the same level across the top. And all my acrylic has been brought to this part of the nail. This part of the nail. Up. Up. So as soon as I take my file, I'm going to get rid of that sidewall there, and my nail is going to be perfect. Let's continue. I'm going to get a big bead this time. She's dry. Yes, she is, folks. See that powder? Way too dry. Oh my gosh, Jen, what are you doing? That's too dry of a bead. No, it's not. Way drier than you think. This is what changed my game, you guys. Realizing that my beads were way too wet. And I was painting the nail, and I was not picking up something that I could manipulate. I've used like half this effing container. That is ridiculous. All right, so here's a big badass bead, okay? She's beautiful. I think it's a little wet actually, so I'm gonna dry her out. But Look at that. I hope this is in frame and all of that. So, one more time. Push her away from the edges. Push her, pat her away from the edges at this angle, like that. That's your first move. Then remember, with this part of your brush, this is what you're using. You use the top, you use the tip of your brush when you want to thin it out. And now I start pushing pressure here in a tapping motion to bring her down. Do you see? If I have to push a little too hard because she's a little too dry because I'm talking, that's okay. You can do that. Just remember to get her off of the sides. You should still be able to see just a little bit of your tip there. If she's lobbed over the sides, you're never gonna recover that without filing a shit ton. Now, this isn't perfect either, but I'm just trying to let you guys see the consistency your beads should be. You should be moving and working your beads essentially in one piece. Even if you're doing a 6-bead method and you're not trying to do a 1 bead. So none of this, you guys, none of this wet stuff where we go like this. Don't do that. That's just, you're wasting your time, your acrylic, your frustration, all of that. These little wet beads, even if they come off your brush looking like that and you think it's a good bead, it can be if you let it dry. If you don't put any more monomer in it and you pat it, that actually can be a good bead. But do not do this. None of this. Don't do that, because every single time you're going to get this unlevel. And of course, I'm being dramatic. I'm being dramatic with how large and dry I'm making these, and I'm being dramatic with how wet and painty I'm doing here. But I just want you guys to get the point. The other thing that changed my game just completely was I was watching V Nailed It, and I was watching Not Polished Tao. If you have not seen, Tao doesn't post any more tutorials on YouTube, but all the ones she's ever posted are still up there. Go watch her. Just go there. Go to Not Polish's YouTube channel and watch her apply acrylic. That is where I noticed for the first time that when she picked up a bead, even with a tiny brush, a big brush, a medium brush, that's where I first noticed that around the edges of the bead were dry. And I was like, wow, why is her bead so dry? Do you see that? See how if I go like this, actual powder will come off? So what you should do, anyone who's struggling with this, is if you want to do it on a piece of paper and make small beads and make medium beads and make large beads, you can do that. Wow, look at that pigment. That's interesting. You can do that, and you can wet your brush and wipe it off and get a small one. You can wet your brush and barely tap it off and get a big one, and bounce 1, 2, 3. You can use any formula you want that helps you get the right consistency bead on your brush. But what helped me was just the visuals of noticing if I want a medium bead. Typically, I'll take off half the liquid in my brush, right? And when I put it in here, one time my eye caught how the brush immediately gets drained. I can see the liquid draining out. So I'm like, oh, when that's empty, there's no more monomer in my brush, I must have picked up a medium bead, because I picked up the right amount from here to get what I want out of here. And that left it dry and crumbly. And I was like, well, that's too dry. And then I started noticing that Tao and V, every single time they picked up a bead, small, medium, large, when they were working, not when they were like showing a video, it would be like this, you guys, like this. Do you see the powder around the edges? It's too dry. That's what you think. It's too dry. It's not. It's actually ever-loving, effing perfect. That is what changed my game. It just completely changed my game. So keeping the acrylic angled like this, like this, toward this high center of the nail, off of the sides, and dry, working with them so much drier so they're malleable, they're not wet, keeping the bead in one piece, even if I'm not saying do a one bead method where your whole bead has to stay together all the way down the nail. I'm saying whatever bead you put down, that's too wet. Whatever beads you put down, keep it in one piece is all I mean. Yeah, that was not a good example. But keep it in one piece. So you shouldn't be separating it by doing this painting. Don't do that. Keep it in one chunk, and to do that, you have to work drier. And let's just say that I completely missed this right here. I don't have any acrylic here. I'm not going to come get a little wet bead and put it here and like fill it in and keep painting on it, because that's doing nothing. It's just doing nothing. Now you have this weird unlevel thing again. So if I am missing acrylic right here, let's just go back to where I was a second ago. If I'm missing acrylic right there, what I'm going to do, I'm still going to use the right consistency to my beads. I'm going to use a nice dry one, and if it needs to be small, it can be small. Just make it dry. If it's not dry enough, dry it out more and put it above it. Okay. Now what I'm doing is wetting my brush and drying it mostly off because I only want this damp. I'm going to push this away from the sidewalls like I mentioned. Pull it down. I'm using this part of my brush to do that. I'm using this to wipe and this to move it. Wipe, move it. I'm just going to bring this down like I would any other normal bead, and that will fill it in because you're working with a clay-like consistency. You see that? And there's no weird different levels. You've kept it off the sides, and you blended this all one-piece bead into this bead. This Miss Mauve, I bought this because I thought it was purple, and it doesn't look like purple, and literally no client has ever asked me for it. So I'm going to use this to start doing these nails. And show you guys how to, now these are not going to be perfect. This is a pop-up method. Look, this one's already coming off. See that? They're not even flushed. I'm not filing them or shaping them. I do have videos on how to file and shape these exact tips because it's what I use on myself and my daughter. They're my favorite, so I have lots of videos on how to shape them. This is strictly application, and I'm going to pull these off. So we're going to do the same thing on these as I was doing on whatever those are called, the swatch sticks. All right, so I'm going to dunk this in, and typically what I do, I'm just going to work by muscle memory, and you guys can watch, because if I slow myself down and show you what I'm doing and explain what I'm doing, the beads dry out, and I don't end up showing you anything good, number one. Number two, like I mentioned in my other video, if I'm teaching you how to ride a bike, I'm going to over-exaggerate what I'm doing and not really teach you how to ride the bike. I'm going to think of steps that I don't really take, whereas if I'm just doing it by memory, I'll actually be showing you what I do. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is just show you what I normally do, and you guys can slow it down. See how she's dry, but now she's not. I'm going to put her right here. First thing I'm going to start doing is moving her away from the sides. And to get acrylic on the sides, I'm going to start bringing her down. And do you see how there is acrylic there, but not much? And same thing here. Pat, pat, pat. I say this all the time in my videos, but patting is the name of the game. I'm just patting her in place and keeping my brush angled like this. Now, when she starts to get a little too firm, I'm gonna bring her down. I'm gonna do this swiping motion, but I'm still keeping this clear tip showing, essentially. Same here. Pat, pat, pat. As soon as you pat it, the acrylic goes there. You can pat it over here. If I'm missing a little acrylic there, that'll be a great way to show you. So you're going to look at this down the barrel like this. So because I was trying to explain, she dried out a little bit, but we're still okay. We're still okay. See how see how my brush looks when I pick it up? I'm using this part of my brush for pressure and this for smoothing. See how my brush looks? It's extremely sloppy and not how I do acrylic because I was trying to explain to you guys. So nice and crumbly around the edges, but see how that's gone now? And she's polymerized? Perfect. Drier than you would think. And I'm gonna blend that, pull, pull. Using the bottom of my brush to blend her down, and I'm tapping this over into the edge. So all that's there is a covering. Normally I wouldn't let that roll over to the sides, but I was showing you guys. So the only time I drag down is if I need to blend it. So really the key to all of this, is how dry your bead is. So what I see when I see people struggling, and when I used to struggle myself, is that beads are too wet. So another thing that really, really helps is if you turn the nail upside down, you can see where your nail tip is. If your acrylic is wider than that, tuck it in. See how much I needed to push that in to actually match my tip shape? And where did that acrylic go? It went to the top, right? So that's how you keep it off the sides. And this C-curve shape is hard. That's why I'm showing you guys how hard it is. Yeah, it's misshapen right there. That's what filing's for. That's okay because I'm just showing you guys. Okay, let's move on to this one. Let's get ourselves I wonder if you could see that drain out of there. God dang it. These long ass freaking nails. All right. Now, if I am using the tip of my brush, it's because I want to tease this bead, again, all in one piece. How I'm getting color to the edges is by tapping. See this? I'm going to tap it up, pat some color there. Once the color is there, I can kind of move it down, push this acrylic to the top. Now I'm literally going to, like I'm looking down the barrel of this nail, make this acrylic the shape of my tip. See that? I don't know if you can see it or not. I can't see what's on my screen without standing up, and then I will lose what I'm doing here. That is quite perfect. That's pretty good. Okay, so let's do another one. And I'm just gonna do this without pretending like I'm showing anybody. I'm just gonna do it how I would normally do it. And actually this Miss Mauve is a really pretty purple. In the container, she looks really pink. So I never used her because I just thought she was that ugly pink color, but she's actually kind of pretty. So another thing that you might not be able to see or tell is the pressure that I'm using with my, ooh, I hope you could see that draining out of there. Look how perfect she is. That is the perfect bead. See how it's not dry anymore, but it was? So I'm gonna move her away from the sides. I'm going to put a little monomer there so that she kind of melts into the cuticle. Now I'm just gonna start doing this patting motion using this part of my brush for the firmness. And again, I'm doing this too slow because I'm showing you, but I'm only just patting the color there and keeping the meat of my bead on top of the nail. This is too dry because I went too slow showing you guys, but it can still pretty much be saved because I can just get some monomer in it and bring it down. So the only time I'm doing this is when the nail, like I need to move it because it's gonna dry on me. Okay. I wanted to dry that out because it was too wet and I'm doing a cuticle bead. So I'm gonna put her here, get my brush a little bit damp, and again, melt the edges by putting monomer there. Monomer with this part of my brush. Pat, pat, pat into place, adding monomer into this bead. And once it's there, I'm gonna pull it down. Beautiful. Let's do this now. Because one thing I wanted to show you is that when I do have her where I want her, pat, 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 pat. And I am bringing her down. The only time I'm pushing with any pressure is if, like I said, I need to move that bead as all one piece. But if I'm just smoothing her out like this, the pressure I'm using is just a feather when I'm doing this smoothing. Perfection, almost too wet, okay? When it's really wet like that, I'll put it all the way up at the top because I'm gonna need to do another cuticle bead anyway. So I'm just gonna keep her wet and just feather her down. She's still all in one piece. Do you see that? Feather, feather, feather. And that gives you that instinct of painting. If you are still feeling that instinct, it still works if your bead is the right consistency. So you guys, I want you to practice picking up beads that you think are too dry. Like that looked way too freaking dry, didn't it? When I first picked it up, and it isn't, it's not, it's perfect. Dang it. Even this mess can be saved as long as it's still in one piece and it's thick and meaty and like clay. Another funga here. This is a great example. Okay, so here I have this C-curve nail, which is like notoriously a hard shape to do, right? And what do I have going on here? I have missing sidewalls, areas that are thicker than others. So what I'm going to do is get a wet brush. Because I have used a malleable thick bead to start with, I'm just going to use a wet brush until this hardens, until I can't move it anymore. I'm going to keep smoothing it out. Again, this is all one bead and all the same consistency. So that's pretty much all I can do with it at this point. That's okay. So here's how you fix that, because this was a problem for me and my application sucks, you guys, because this is a badass color, actually. Wow. Okay, So how you fix that is you're going to still use your right consistency beads, a little drier than you think, until you start doing these on paper and practice nails, until you learn what's too dry and what's too wet. You're just not going to know what I'm talking about until you feel it and you make that bead. Okay, so I'm going to put it where I want it to be, and how I'm going to fill that in is still with one bead. Now, it could take me 4 beads to do it, but I'm only going to be moving around the 1 bead. See how dry that looked? And it was still wet enough to run into my cuticle. Think about how wet it would be if I had used it wetter. Think about what a disaster that would have been. So, how am I fixing this sidewall area that has no acrylic, basically? I'm going to pick up the same bead that still is a little bit dry, use the same bead, and you can move it. Because again, she's staying one piece. So it's easy for you to mold and manipulate and move how you want. Because it's not runny, it's one piece of clay. So here on this part needs to be a little bit more wet. It needs to be pulled down. Right here, she's gone too far over the side, so I'm gonna build her up here again, because remember, we bring everything to the top and keep it off the sides. So naturally that gave me some extra that I don't need on the nail, and that's where I'm pulling it off the edge here. But look, my side's covered. My side's completely covered now. So is this side, just from me naturally doing beads. Let's do this. And you guys, I'm not saying I'm perfect, I'm far from it. But what improved my game 1000% was noticing that V and Tau's beads were dry around the edges. And that made me start playing with my acrylic until I could see that I was picking up a bead that was dry on the edges. And that's when everything changed for me. That's when I realized that I could put a bead on the nail that I was able to manipulate and control. Now, this is like the shittiest application on earth ever, but it still looks okay. If I spent a little time filing this, I would be okay. And that's because I used beads that were controllable instead of painting or polishing. Too dry, right? Nope. Give it a second, and she's perfect. That's actually too wet. Which one needed it? Oh, this one. Ooh, I love laying beads like that. I love it when they come out like that. So pat, pat, melt. Pat, pat, melt it. As soon as you're patting, you're manipulating it, you're adding monomer, and that lets you work it. I hope this helps. I hope I don't have any kind of weird, arrogant tone to my voice. Sometimes I hear myself and I'm talking like that, like an idiot. Definitely don't mean that, like ever. I just talk with expression because it was things. Now I'm making this way too thick, but I'm just giving you some more examples. It was because when I was learning, if you have a wet bead, you can kind of do this, but again, it's still that one piece bead. It's not, see how she's still thick enough to like work? I forgot what I was saying. Oh, like the tone in my voice of like, see, you can do it. It's because that's how I would talk to myself. Like, oh my gosh, Jen, like that's all you needed to do this whole time was just work drier. Like it was just the biggest light bulb that went off in my head ever. Biggest light bulb ever. And I'm using my little brush. Earlier I was using my big brush. You can do this with any size brush. It doesn't matter what people say about your, you can't pick up big beads with a small brush. Not true. I have a video on my channel where I did a 4XL stiletto tip with one bead with this brush. You can pick up whatever you want if you practice enough to know what you're doing. So I'm gonna take these off. Hopefully they just come off. Yep. Oh, thank goodness. I thought that was gonna be a big fat freaking mess. And, oh, God dang it. Oh, jeez. So how I did that, you guys, is I have my regular, this is actually polygel. I was trying it on my nails. On this hand, I have builder gel in a bottle, which obviously didn't come out well. But at Target, when I swipe products against that scanner, you know, the belt, my nails actually get caught under there and they rip. So they're literally down to nubs. So I had to put something on them to stop that from happening. So what I'm going to do now is, and I hope that it helps, is I do have some, because I was sloppy and messy and going fast and over explaining myself with these. So I do have these same really C-curved tips on my Vita Bella practice hand over here. So hopefully we can do some more. And hopefully this video isn't long and exhausting and drawn out and I'm not saying the same damn thing over and over again and not making any sense. I hope, just ignore this because earlier I was trying to give you guys a side angle and that just was not working. So, let's see if I can help you guys some more or not. I don't know. Also, what really helps is cutting my table towels into smaller pieces so I can just, you know, peel them off when I'm done with them. All right, so we'll use Miss Mauve again. And hopefully, when I'm editing this, I can zoom in enough. Oh, I was explaining to you. I have my regular polygel on and then I use this UNT or UNT. I just put that on top of here and go in with, and that's how I'm able to just peel those off. I don't do anything else to the nail. All right, so I'm just gonna pretend like you guys aren't watching and I'm not trying to explain anything and I'm just gonna apply these nails here. That loud noise is my air conditioning unit. Sorry, you guys. This right now, when I'm doing this, I'm going really lightly. I'm just smoothing out because I have the acrylic where I want it. So I'm just smoothing the top out. Okay, and I'm pretty much getting all the acrylic out of there to get this nice cuticle bead. She looks kind of dry. No, she's not. If you're working with something a little wet, you can hold her here for a minute before you let her go. That also helps polymerize. Obviously, she needs filing, but that's pretty good. You see how the sides are a little sheer? As soon as I take my file there, I'll get rid of that clear area. But if that really bothers me that I can see that, I'm just gonna get a dry bead and just put it here. See how it melts right away? It's not really that dry. There's always more monomer in your brush than you think. And then tap it into place. And right here is where you want to blend it away. And then right here, take it off. And now you're going to pat. Blend. Remove. So if it really bothers you that that clear is showing, that's how you get rid of it. Because it used to bother me. I could never get it right. I would always have too much or not enough right here, especially with C-curve. And C-curve was my favorite shape and still is. So I had to learn how to do it. But see how you can see this here? Now, if I were doing a marble and I needed to have design there and I had to have it, then I might go in with kind of a wet bead and do the painting I kind of told you guys not to do. It's okay if you just need to fill in some space because you're not trying to put beads there. You're just trying to cover that. And once that dries, and as soon as you run your file over it, she'll be perfect. So it's okay to do that then. When you already have your shape, your structure, and everything, you can fill in a tiny area with a wet bead that you paint. That's fine. That should be the only time you're kind of using a wet, like painted bead. Let's use a different brush to show how we can do essentially the same thing. Because it's not my brush, and it's not really the tips. It's not my monomer or my acrylic. I mean, all those things come into play, but it's how you pick up a bead. It's your bead consistency, your liquid to powder ratio, however you want to say that. When you learn how dry you can work, I mean, and literally pick up the driest bead you think you can, like, oh my God, that is too dry. It's never going to work. And put it on a nail and see what you can do with it. Keep doing that until you figure out, like, look, that was not too dry, you guys. Do you see that? She was a little bit too dry, but I could put monomer in her and still make her work. But beads that are too wet are just never going to, they're always going to make your life hard. No, you don't want to work with beads this dry and think, oh, I can save it, let me just add monomer to it like I just did here. Because, yeah, you can do it technically, especially on a practice hand if you're just trying to make a set of nails. But if you put a bead that dry, especially up here on a cuticle on a client, you're going to get lifting. Because under there, it's still a little too dry. Yes, you've gotten monomer into the top of this bead to get it to technically maneuver where you wanted it on the nail, but it's not adhering like it should. It's still a little too dry for that. So I was only joking with you guys. But again, you can see how I've left my sidewall pretty empty. Same here, pretty empty. Forgot what I was saying. Oh, so keep picking them up until you figure what is as dry as you can work. That's what you guys should be doing. Is that too dry? Nope. Nope, she's perfect. That is what surprised me, was actually how dry I should be working this whole time. Because I would get some beads that were really workable and think, wow, how did I do that? Not realizing that I had just picked it up much drier because I didn't have my muscle memory down yet, where I just picked up the same bead every time, no matter what brush I was using. Now, if you do that and you wipe it all off, just patting listening to V say that she did more patting than wiping also saved my ass. You guys should go watch and listen to, now that you kind of know how to apply acrylic and you're doing sets of nails, rewatch sets that she's done and apply what you've learned to the things she does. Because then you'll notice, oh, that's what she meant by blank, blank, blank. Because sometimes nail tutorials, they're not using the right words or a word that makes sense to you because you haven't encountered that issue yet. Like she might say boop, 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 sidewall, and you haven't learned what the sidewall is yet. You're still trying to figure out how to pick up a freaking bead. So like go back and watch things that you think you've already learned from. And now I'm picking up really wet beads here, you guys, because I was kind of testing myself to see how wet I should go, which it actually works, but look how it does not look as good as she does. No. All right, let's go dry here. What was I saying? Yeah. Rewatch someone that helped you, someone you learned from, rewatch them and see if something else they're saying makes sense. So the first thing I'm doing every time I lay down a bead is moving it away from the sides. Tapping and blending, pushing, tapping. Really, that's all you're doing is tapping this one piece, no matter how big the piece is, little, small, the whole nail, a quarter of the nail, the bottom of the nail, the top of the nail, patting it into place. And every time you loosen and pat right here, it's going to cover your sides, like your sides are done. You don't even need to do any wiping until you kind of get to the end and you're like, oh, let me smooth that out. See? But to get it there, you're going to tap. Gosh, I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't say things that confused you guys or made it worse or anything like that. But if I could say anything that you should take from this video is please practice how dry of a bead you can work with. Work as dry as you can. Now, a really dry bead isn't going to work if you're working with an acrylic that's super chalky. If your nail room is 85 degrees, no, you need to work, you need to know your acrylic, you need to know your temperature. See how there's no acrylic here? I'm gonna pat that in place. That's how I'm getting acrylic to the sides of my C-curve, by patting it there, then dragging it down. But I'm only dragging it down because I'm smoothing it out, not because I'm actually moving it. I'm only barely wiping that. I'm gonna, what was I saying? Oh yeah, obviously your temperature, the temperature of your room matters, you know, a lot. I'm gonna use these tips, which are the tips I used on the nail set I just posted, which have no C-curve. These are no C-curve. These ones that V uses, that I started using, that I love as well. So, the difference, if you guys can see, is no C-curve, C-curve. So, same thing, I'm gonna move it away from the sides and tap it down as I go. See how there's no acrylic? So if I just move her down, tapping right here puts the acrylic on the edge. Okay, tap, tap, tap. I can tap up. I'm still using this part of my brush to do that. Tap, tap, tap. Now I can start brushing a little bit up or down because my bead is almost set, and I'm not going to be painting. I'm literally still moving it in one chunk, if that makes sense. Now I can smooth it out, and I love to drag acrylic off the bottom and do this because it just gives it that shape. So the reason I'm doing this on this tip is I want to show you how you can start with a really square C-curve and have trouble getting your acrylic on the sidewalls until you kind of learn it, or you can work with a square tip and make it into a C-curve with your drill bit, which I'm sure you've seen lots of nail techs do. Do you see how I patted that in place, and what I'm dragging down is the meat over here? This is too much, so I'm gonna pat until I get acrylic where I want it in these spaces that don't have it, but the little clear line is still showing. That's what you want. And right here, I want to use some pressure because I want to bring this down. So I'm using this part of my brush, the back end of my brush, the ferrule, the base. And I almost let this dry too much because I was talking, but not really. I can still get it there. Okay. So while this one dries, and I want you to see the difference. So high arch C-curve, no C-curve, or very, very, very flat, limited, minimal C-curve. And I went a little bit wet with this one because I wanted to fill in a little bit of that space that I had taken away from here a minute ago when that was too dry. So I used a little bit wetter of a bead for filling in that area right here. I'm going to hold it in place instead of drying it out. That lets it polymerize. Melt my cuticle area. Tap, tap, tap. Blend. Okay, while she dries, I'm gonna clean up a little bit and put this away and then show you what I was going to show you, what my point of that was. I really hope this helped. I really hope that I really helped somebody change their game, because I'm telling you, just the whole, I'm working too wet and I'm painting the nail instead of applying acrylic changed my game. So if my beads being dry and a little bit crumbly around the edges, if I didn't show that good enough, or if you think I'm crazy, or if you think that's not going to work for you or whatever, again, please go watch some of V's videos, not specifically the ones where she's showing you how to liquid powder ratio, because she's going to be pat, pat, tap, tap, and doing all of that. And yeah, I'm sure it's a good video. I really haven't watched it because I had figured it out by then. But when she and or Tao isn't showing you and isn't trying to explain how they lay beads, is when you're going to see them picking up those dry beads that work for them. And that's when you're going to have the aha moment. That's what happened for me. My room smells so good. Have you guys used Cara Sky monomer? Like, once the nails dry, you just want to smell them. Just, my God, it smells like candy. It's the best thing ever. Okay, since this is a practice hand, I'm just going to pull it out and I'm going to show you guys the application. So she's pretty tight all the way around. And how are we going to file this? Well, let's just grab a Tammy Taylor. You see from the underside of the nail how the acrylic kept that V shape, that's all you're gonna do is keep that V, keep this very straight to the tip, like that, and then you're gonna come in and do the same thing and keep moving your file like that. Now you can see where I need to even it out, right? Because my file's touching here and here, but not here. So that means I need to thin this out and thin this out to get to here, right? So that's what I would keep doing if it were me. I would keep going right here, really flat in this direction until I have all that area, if that makes sense to you. And keep this flat at the same time. So then I'm gonna keep going and see where I'm at here. I need to file here and here. Essentially, I need to file all of it, but those are the areas I'm trying to get flat. I hope that makes sense. I always knock the nail like this to get the dust off. Same here. Just get that little nib off. That was part of the tip. Flat to keep that straight look. Now curve it in. Flat. Keep that flat. Remember, I had hardly any acrylic on these side walls. I'm not filing it off because I'm only going where my file says I don't have acrylic, remember? See? All the acrylic still there. We didn't file it off, and I'm using a 100 grit file. I'm using quite a bit of pressure too, and now I just realized I'm probably shaking my table and my camera. So I'm gonna do that to all the sides until I have that even look where nothing is missing. I've got that same look across all the nail. Then I'm going to very straight and flat do my edge. And of course, do your normal, whatever you do here. But this is it for the shape. That's it. That's all the filing you need to do, except for maybe to buff and remove those scratches a little bit. Now I'm using a 180 side. And because our application was so trim and smooth, that's it. That is all the filing you're going to do. It's not hard. That took, what, 45 seconds, 1 minute maybe per nail. And there you go. That's what I do, okay? And the reason I made this nail for you guys is because I want to show you this. You don't want to learn the torture of this, of how to get acrylic on these sides. Even though I showed you it's all about padding, right? Just padding it into place. You can get a bit like this. Any bit will do. Any bit that's narrow enough to fit in the space you're trying to make or use. But see how this doesn't really have a C curve, but it has a little bit of thickness. I'm gonna use a thin bit. And I do this on almost every set on my channel, so if you watch and pay attention, you'll see me doing it. So I have my file, my e-file at about 11,000, and I'm simply going to go like this and create a C curve. Now I have a C curve there where I did not before, because I'm making it. That was a square nail, but I just made a C curve. I made it into a C curve nail. On this nail that I just filed, the only thing I need to do with this is probably get this little bit of acrylic out of here to crisp up my shape underneath. And maybe right here, just a wee bit. And then I would do my cuticle, sealing of my cuticles like always, but that nail's done. She's freaking perfect. I would wear that all day. These here, to trim up their C curve, if you have a little bit of acrylic right here, you're gonna do the same thing. Use a really thin bit and C curve it out, like carve it out. That spot right there, you're gonna just carve it with a thin bit. And as soon as you do this, that will go away. Not as soon as, but once you file, you'll have your C curve. Now again, this is a very exaggerative C-curve tip, which is why I freaking love them, because my nails are flat as hell. So when I want false nails, I want a freaking C-curve to my nail, me personally. So let's file her. This was now I didn't do the application, I didn't put hardly any acrylic here because I wasn't trying to do application, but same thing. All you're gonna do is follow the side of your tip very flat, move it over. Where do I need to file? I need to file here and here. So no, I'm not done yet. Until all of that's white, I'm gonna put pressure in those spots and move it over. This is how I file, even on a client. You can look at my videos. This is all wobbly because I wasn't trying to do application necessarily. It was more beads. But even when it's all out of wonk, you're still going, sorry if I was shaking the table, you're still going to, god dang it, everything square and flat. So I can see where I need to file here. See these missing spots? I need to bring the acrylic all to the same level. I'm sure you guys know that, but filing these are the same as filing any other nail because it's just about your shape. If your application is there and you have made your nail essentially the shape of the tip, you have hardly any work to do. I'm getting that out from underneath there because I lobbed some over. Okay, so remember that this nail started out as a really flat square tip, and I have made her into pretty much a coffin C-curve just by carving out that free edge. Now I've got her all crooked, but you get the point. See her? See the C-curve? Not as dramatic as this, but you do have a C-curve, and I can make her more dramatic. If I file her too short and I lost my C-curve, I can do it again. There she is. Almost as good as that C-curve. Of course, fix this. But you see what you're doing, right? You're just thinning out the nail from the underside instead of the top. I made her super uneven, so sorry about that. But yeah, so this tip started off as that straight, no C-curve tip, and look what I have. Still not perfect because, gosh, it's hard to do when you're holding on to nothing, so let me try it again. That's better. Another thing, and not to toot, not polish his horn, but did you notice I didn't need to clear cap? I have these perfectly gorgeous nails. One, like they're not too thick, they're not too thin. The shape is right. None of my filing removed any of the acrylic really. Yeah, you do not need to cap it and clear. So there's the ones I filed. This one looks quite a lot like this one. Of course, this is more tapered, more streamlined because it's made to be that way, but you can get the same look or similar or even thinner. This is actually like thinner and more delicate than these. Well, because I haven't filed them a lot, but this one is filed. And do you see the difference? I actually like this one better. A lot of times if my client, like the last two sets I did on, sorry, my hands are crusty and gross, you guys, but they're just dusty from all of this. I don't have time to get up and wash them in between talking to you. Shantae. the 90s nails and the white set I just posted. This is the tip I use on her, which are those Stella and Baby ones I show in the videos. And look at that beautiful C-curve coffin that you can make with that tip. And that was a square, no C-curve. So if you don't want something this dramatic and have to learn and teach yourself how to get all of that on the sides, even though, again, all you do is pat, and look, your acrylic is there. Now let's look at this one. Do you see how the acrylic isn't there? You see that clear tip that I left there? No problem. No problem at all. In fact, that's what you really like. As soon as you start filing right here and do your normal roll around to the side like we're doing, that's gone. That's gone. You have, that was a little dramatic, but you have it. Like right here. That little clear, that tiny clear bit disappears as soon as you do your swipe with your file. And it was here too. It was, that's how I did all of these nails. So anyway, depending on what kind of look you want, you can achieve it with either one. I actually really like the way this looks. I love this, don't get me wrong, oh my God, because I love a C-curve and I love them a little thick like this. If it were me wearing them, it would be this. But I know a client will love this. Look at that shape. And you saw it took me hardly nothing. So the key, again, the key to all of it, and I don't want to say this like every single other nail tech says, liquid to powder ratio, your application, practice, practice. But yeah, it took me 3 years to understand that, no joke. It took me practicing every single day, every day. And it took me watching hours and hours and hours of videos. So if that's what you're already doing, then you're already doing the right thing, and you will get it. I just hope this helps speed it along a little bit for you, because no one ever told me I should be working with drier beads than I thought, or that I shouldn't be working wet or painting down the nail, or that I should be trying to keep whatever size bead I put on the nail in one piece and manipulating it wherever I want it to go, like keeping it together. I don't know if I said any of that right or if I helped you guys, but I really, really hope I did. Please ignore my dusty, crusty hands. Thank you so much for watching and being here. You know I love you guys. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.